Hi, Shay. It's great to have you with me today. I have to say that she was very open to scheduling again for this podcast episode because I had to deal with something else previously. So thank you for that. And you know, we had I don't know, last time we connected, it was a couple months ago, and I
Mhm.
enjoyed hearing what you had to share, how you're helping other people. So why don't you just open up with who you are, what you're doing today, and what you're really passionate about at the moment?
Well, thank you, John. I appreciate it. And, no worries about having to change things. We are an ADHD household, so we just go with the flow. I mean, things change all the time here. So that's something we're used to. I'm a mom of 9 kids in a blended family, grandma of 19, and we have varying degrees of ADHD with all of these kids. So it's kind of, I wouldn't say the grandkids yet because some of them are too small to know, but I work and serve people, actually mostly women, that are entrepreneurial moms and business moms that are either having their own business, struggling in that business, or struggling with their job that they have due to some of the symptoms that we deal with ADHD. Because a lot of us, one, we either don't know that we actually have it because we're diagnosed later, or two, we're in the middle of it and we just don't know how to get out of it. So that's where I really focus is working with the moms with it because we moms struggle a lot. And then if we're trying to do a business on top of it, talk about a mountain.
Yeah, I'm not a mom, but I can see, what moms deal with all the time, especially with kids and they're having a business as well at the same house. Um, so how do you go ahead and start with helping, somebody like that? Where do you begin?
A lot of times I just sit down with them and I say, okay, tell me about what's going on in your life because it's very easy to just make a lot of assumptions and just jump right in. But what I've learned is that ADHD is not something that is the same. It's not a one size fits all. So you really have to sit down with the person and say, okay, tell me a little bit about what's going on in your life. Tell me a little bit about where the struggles are, what's working, what's not working, because each area, even though it may be the similar symptom, like maybe they're struggling with disorganization, how they deal with the organization for them is the way their brain works. And so you have to kind of walk through what are the processes and steps that are working for them, and then now you want to take those systems and processes and say, okay, let's fit it into what you're doing right now. Because a lot of times, what we do, especially those that are dealing with neurodivergence, which is another classification or way of talking about people with like ADHD and autism and anything that has to do with outside of the normal, is considered neurodivergent. And what that means is that we're trying to take what's considered normal or a neurotypical brain and trying to fit us into that on how normal people would do it. So instead of doing that, we take it and say, okay, what is your way of doing it? And then we create their process and their system, which then allows them to start seeing that they can get through it. They can meet the deadlines. They can be on time. They can have a clean house and not be in chaos. And so we say, let's embrace that chaos. Let's look at it, see what it is, and then work with it instead of trying to push it back. Because I mean, I'm sure you understand this, John, when you push on something or somebody else's hand, what happens? They naturally push back. So the more you resist something, the more it's going to push back and cause more problems. So why not embrace it, look at it, and let's walk through it?
Hmm. So is it like procrastination mixed in with what you're saying there?
There is some that deal with procrastination that really struggle with that. Some of us deal with the way that we get motivated or moving forward into taking care of a deadline is that we have that urgency. So I'm sure you've heard a lot of moms or dads saying, "Oh my gosh, I wish my child would stop waiting till the last minute to get their book report done or their homework done." What happens is they get to that point and it's urgent now. So it's like it's on fire. So they have to take care of that fire to get it completed and get it turned in on time. And that's that motivation. So for some people, we take that motivation, say, okay, you need urgency. How can we create the urgency before it gets to that on fire? So if you have these little urgencies on the way, your brain will then kick in and be like, oh, okay, I need to get that done. Instead of it waiting and waiting and waiting till it's the night before, and you have to do this massive amount of work to get it done by the deadline in the morning.
Yeah. So I don't know where ADHD comes in here, but do I have it? Like, like
It's possible.
yeah, right. So, sometimes I'll do the same thing. We all do in a way, right?
Right.
And
Mhm.
it sounds like you're recommending take little steps each day to get to that deadline when it's supposed to be met.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Correct. But you have to do it the way your brain works. So if your brain works on urgency, you have to create those mini urgencies to get to that end result, the end goal. Now, does that mean because you do it, does that mean you have ADHD? Not necessarily. But if you're sharing the same symptoms, why not try it?
Mhm.
Not saying classify yourself as someone with ADHD, but why not try the tips? Why not try the processes and the symptoms? In fact, most women are not diagnosed until they're in their 30s, 40s, and maybe even later. It's because we aren't exhibiting it the same way as men do. So men will exhibit it more in the physical side of it. Not meaning that women don't, but we're not classified into it in the same way. Our brains are what's really the hyperactive side. We have, it could be inattentive, that we're just not focusing on anything. It could be that we're, hypersensitive and we're just constantly having those emotional roller coasters going up and down. There's a lot of internal that's going on with women versus men. There's a lot of external symptoms that you can see. So that's why they're diagnosed a little bit earlier and younger.
Is how did you find out about you having ADHD?
Well, that's kind of a funny story because my second to youngest son was diagnosed with ADHD in fifth grade. And that was because our teacher was actually pushing us to get him diagnosed because she felt like he had it. And even though teachers aren't supposed to tell you that, she talked to us about it. And so we took him in and we found out. And he said, well, does any of his relatives have ADHD? And my husband had ADHD. And so at the time, we were like, okay, so if his dad has it and he has it, is it possible? Because I have siblings that we were never diagnosed, but it's clearly for sure that they had ADHD. I mean, if you go through the symptom list, it's like they hit every notch. But we didn't go get diagnosed because of the stigma back then. And even there's a stigma now still that if you have ADHD, there's something wrong with you. But that's not true. It's just you do things differently. So how we found out was through him. And then they're like, maybe you should get diagnosed because you seem to be exhibiting some of these too. And I went in and was diagnosed, and I was probably late 30s, early 40s. I can't remember the exact time, but it was almost a relief because I was like, I could look back on my life and be like, oh, there wasn't anything wrong with me. I just was dealing with ADHD and didn't know what I was dealing with.
Yeah. So how did you feel? Did you feel good about that then? Like looking back at the
It,
past?
it was good and bad. It was like, oh, if I would have been diagnosed earlier, I could have had other processes and things that could help me. But then at the same time, I also understand that stigma that was going on at the time that if you're diagnosed with ADHD, then you're a trouble kid, you're a troublemaker, or you're one of those bad kids because you can't sit still, or whatever the issue was that the stigma was coming out. So it's kind of a love and hate type of thing where you're like really glad you're diagnosed. You can look back and say, oh, I was just hitting all those things. But then it was this, the sad side of it going, well, what could I have gotten? What kind of support could I have had? But as an adult looking back, we can also say, okay, I can take care of myself now. Now I know what to do, right?
Yeah. Um, I would imagine most people come to you after they already find out they have ADHD, but do you find people coming to you that don't know if they have it?
I do. In fact, quite a few of my clients have come to me, and as we've talked, a lot of the things they're talking about and the frustrations they're talking about, I just am like, it's possible. You might want to consider this. You might want to get checked. If you don't care about the diagnosis, then let's just work with it as it is. So I leave that up to them because I'm not a clinician, so I can't diagnose anyone. But I can say, here are the symptoms, educate yourself. If you feel like you need to go get a diagnosis, then go. I encourage them to find out. But whether you are diagnosed or not diagnosed, if the symptoms are the symptoms, then deal with them. If the struggle is there, deal with it. Look at it, and then say, what steps can I take to work with it, to grow with it, create my own process? And how is my brain actually working? Because a lot of times we, again, are trying to fit into this box that is said to be the right way. and this is the wrong way. When in reality, with ADHD, it's not really a wrong or right. It's kind of like, how does it flow for me to be able to do it? If I said to you, John, I want you to wait until the last minute to do this task and deadline, what is your feeling that comes up? Okay, cool. I normally do that. Or, oh my gosh, that would make me so ill.
Yeah. That for me, I probably make me ill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that means the way that you process deadlines is this certain way. For someone who wants that urgency, yeah, it's in the back of their mind. They might be pondering on it, thinking about it every once in a while, but they won't do or act on it until the night before or an hour before or 2 hours before.
Yeah, there are like, for example, I'll be speaking next weekend at, so like that's on my priority list, like to get prepared for that. But then there's other things I've been pushing off, like it's urgent, but not as urgent in my eyes, right?
Right.
So, so for instance, I'll be working on figuring out what's going on next weekend now, and then I'll take care of the little stuff in my eyes, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, everybody's different, and whether you have ADHD or not, it's just how we handle things. We're all different.
Right.
Um, I can't remember. I probably did. I probably in school. I probably just waited till the last minute sometimes because it was a test and I didn't care. I'm
Right.
sure my kids do the same thing. You have a full family at your house. How do you handle something like that?
Well, I will say that my husband and I have only been married 7 years. So I've only been a mom of a blended family of 9 for the last 7 years. And I will say it was kind of a blessing. Most of them were older and grown up and out of the house. But when we get together, it's interesting watching everyone because the way they handle that excess energy or the way they think is very different. Like I've got one son who he paces when he's thinking. And when I first met him, I was like, is he like irritated with me or, is he upset or something? Because I'm reading it through what I would be like and do. But for him, that was just how he would process the extra energy that he has. We've got another son who will sway when he's talking. And for people, that sometimes makes you nauseous. And then we have another son who's very quiet. He observes, but he doesn't handle all the noise very well because it's too overstimulating. And then we have another son, there's 7 of them. We have another son he feeds on that energy. He loves the excitement. He loves the loudness. He loves the energy that comes from having everybody together because it is loud and there's like 10 conversations going on all at once. And we're keeping up with all of them. So it can be fun, but at times it can be very overstimulating and overwhelming, because we also deal with a lot of emotional dysregulation. So if you've got a child that leans more like that, you have to kind of work with them to teach them, how do you figure out you're too overstimulated? What do you need to do? And then for the one over here on the other end of it, that's like, I'm so excited and I talk forever. You teach him how things are appropriate. We don't interrupt constantly. We don't, if mom's talking to another adult, we don't interrupt. We wait. We may tap her to let her know that there is something, but you don't stand there and constantly tap until she has to interrupt the conversation. So it's working together with that cognitive thinking because a lot of ADHD people have a struggle with forecasting. What I make a decision to do now, what are the consequences that are going to follow? Or what I choose not to do now, what consequences are going to follow? And so there's a lot of little things that you need to teach these kids as they grow up. But even as an adult, you really have to continue maintaining some of those teachings because sometimes it takes people with ADHD a little bit longer to get their prefrontal lobe turned on and make decisions without impulse, to make decisions that will help them to be able to, decide on school and be able to figure out their jobs and all of the things that come with being an adult.
Yeah. So people that have ADHD, do they not tend to take risks?
Oh, no, they do.
They do.
But again, like I said before, it's not a one size fits all. You have some that are very, very high risk takers, and then you've got some that are very averse to it. So my husband now, he is very much a risk taker, not in a detrimental way, but like in business. So he's more willing to say, hey, we'll put it out this far for the risk. Whereas we've got friends that are the opposite, where they're like, nope, we aren't even going to attempt it. We're going to make sure we have this cash flow here and this cash amount. Whereas my husband's like, no, it'll come. I know it'll come. We can take that risk. And so there's, like I said, it goes either way. It's just which way were they, one, how were they taught growing up? And two, what beliefs do they carry about themselves? Because for him, he may have more of a high confidence in being able to feel okay if the risk, if he takes that risk and it fails, how will he interpret that? Whereas the person over here that's adverse to risk, are they adverse to risk because they're scared of what the failure means and what they take that failure on? And so it's kind of like you have to find that mixture of what beliefs have they picked up because of their ADHD? Do they look at it because of it saying, you're a failure, you're a troublemaker, and you're always going to have problems? Or are they looking at it as, I can think outside the box, I'm capable of building things, and no matter what, I can always bounce back? So the belief system is a huge part of it too.
And that would stem mostly from them growing up, I would imagine, with their, yeah.
Yeah, some of it's from growing up, what they've been told, some of it's from their own experiences. If you're in an environment where you have a lot of peers around you and something happens, what do your peers say to you? And the peers could be siblings, it could be parents, it could be friends, it could be, authoritative people in their lives like teachers, mentors, coaches, things like that. What have they said to you when you've had this, situation or circumstance come up? Did they talk down to you? Did they treat you like you were nothing? Did they treat you like you were dumb? Did you pull into that what they were saying, or were you capable of saying, that's just their thought, no big deal? So it plays a lot into how they've experienced it and where their beliefs are coming from.
Yeah. So deal with just women, correct?
Mostly women.
Okay,
We
mostly
learn
women.
tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, how do they find somebody like you that, hey, I mean, like, I have this business. I work at home and I have kids and stuff, like it's just, it's a good niche that you got,
Mhm.
I wouldn't even think about it. Um, I'm just curious how they find you and what would you say that makes them want to reach out to somebody like yourself? What is the common theme?
The common theme seems to be having a problem with productivity, having a problem with organization, and then having a problem with their worth, feeling like they are never good enough, that they're never going to achieve whatever goal or status that they're trying to achieve because of the ADHD. And how they find me, I do some speaking. It's a lot of word of mouth. I haven't really gotten out there very much, but as I grow, they're going to find me because they're going to hear about it. You're right. The niche is not very commonly known. It's not very, uh, like everybody knows about life coaching, right? But not everybody knows that there are ADHD coaches. And it's my responsibility and my duty to get out there and let them know, hey, there is somebody here who gets you, who knows what you're going through and who is walking through that process and also walking it through with you. Because not only am I ADHD, I also am like 10 times the amount of ADHD I was before. And that's from a car accident. But what the main point is that if you are in need, search for it. If you are in need of finding somebody that can help you in a certain specific way, search for it. Go online and find out. Talk to people. Ask them, hey, have you heard of anybody that helps with ADHD? And if you want a therapist, then ask for a therapist that's specific with ADHD. Ask for somebody who has experience with it. One thing that I really struggle with is watching people trying to coach people with specific issues and they haven't walked through it themselves. Yes, we can see people and we can try and work with them and help them, but you don't really understand it unless you walk through it. And so finding someone that can really connect with you and help you walk through the process is great. And you know what? Look online. I'm online. There's other ADHD coaches online. It's very simple to find them. You just have to search for them, check them out, see if they connect with you, and then move forward.
Yeah, that's great. So what would you say was the biggest problem you had to deal with personally with ADHD and let's just say your business and anything else you can think of?
Well, I had workarounds with growing up. You just figure out workarounds. But after my car accident, it 10 times. So everything that I was using as workarounds didn't work anymore. And I'd say the biggest struggle is people not understanding it, not understanding the struggle behind it. Because it's really simple to look at somebody with a broken arm and say, oh, they broke their arm, so they're going to have some issues with their arm. But when you see somebody is dealing with some type of neurodivergence or a TBI, which is a traumatic brain injury, or anything that doesn't show outwardly, you really struggle with explaining it to people. There's an expectation of, oh, you've had time to heal, so move on. So I think that's probably one of the biggest parts. And the other part was the emotional dysregulation. At the beginning of the healing and the time where the ADHD was worse, somebody could look at me and they didn't even have to say anything and I'd burst into tears. And that's a really difficult thing to handle, especially when you're in business. I was actually in an interview and they were talking to me and they asked me a question. I honestly don't remember the question, but when they asked that question, I burst into tears. Now, you know for sure that I didn't get the job because they're looking at me and going, oh my gosh, she's like totally off the rails. But it wasn't that I was totally off the rails. My brain just said, we're done. There you go. Release the emotions so you can get back to your zero ground, your baseline. And so that's probably, I'd say, one of the biggest struggles in business because nobody wants to see emotion in business, right? They want you to be calm. They want you to be cool and collected. As far as any other aspects, I would say probably being able to have that productivity process. For normal people, they get up, they go to work, they have their days built in. Like, we're going to work on the emails and then we're going to move to this and then we're going to move to the next thing. For someone with ADHD, a shiny pulls their attention span, right? So I could be working on the emails and notification could come in and I'd be like, oh, I need to check that. Or there's somebody that walks into the room while I'm working on something and says, hey, can you answer a question? That can take up to 20 or 30 minutes for someone with ADHD to switch back to what they were doing and getting into full focus. So that was probably the biggest ones that I've had to deal with. And being able to back out, do not talk to me. I love you. You are wonderful people, but if you open my door, there better be, like an emergency going on.
Yeah. And that's a great point that you mentioned the 20 to 25 minutes because I've learned that in a course I took too. And it was nothing to do with ADHD. It was just
Right.
like, it was just, and it's so true. Um, Now you're a woman, you tend to multitask, I guess, as most women do. I cannot. We're men, we focus, right? So if I'm here doing this and the dog comes over to me and distracts me, it's going to take me longer to get back to what I'm doing, which I've read and was told it could be about 20 to 25 minutes to get back in the zone again.
Mhm.
That's a lot of time. Uh,
It is. It
Yeah.
is a lot of time. And it can actually, with people with ADHD, if they're in a focus and you walk in and interrupt them, do not be surprised if they react in anger because it's such a hard switch in their brain because they're focused and then you've come in and interrupted. It's almost like taking a hammer and just smacking you in the head with it. And you don't mean to be nasty or you don't mean to react that way, but it's just that, oh my gosh, do you have to interrupt me? And it's the same way watching a movie. If we're watching a movie and we're really focused in the movie and then someone comes in and starts asking us questions about the movie, you're like, oh my gosh, just sit down, shut up and watch the movie and you'd be just fine. And we don't mean to react that way. It just happens. But as far as the multitasking, yeah, women tend to do a little bit of multitasking, but I think we have it in a coordinated way that it works. And for people with ADHD, sometimes we do the multitasking just because we're so distracted. And what I mean by that is I call it the Roomba effect. So like not Roomba the dance, but Roomba the vacuum. And how does a Roomba vacuum work? It bounces off the walls, right? So it just goes along, hits something, and then goes back. Well, for an ADHD person, here's an example. You go into the kitchen, you're going to do dishes. You see the dirty tea towels. You're like, oh, I'll put those in the laundry room. You walk into the laundry room. Oh, there's a basket of clothes I need to fold. I'll just fold those really quick. Then you take that basket of clothes to the rooms and deliver all the clothes. And you're like, oh, I should just put them away. And then you put them away and you walk in the bathroom and you see more dirty clothes and you take them back to the laundry room. And you're like, wait a minute. Wasn't I doing the dishes? And so it's not necessarily that we're really multitasking. I think it's we just see all these shinies and we just try to hurry and get them done so that we can get to the thing we started to.
That's great. I can see that. I don't know. Hey, you're starting to talk about me. I have no idea. But yeah, it is funny. So, Shaye, I have one question I ask everybody at the end of the episode here, and feel free, we can talk a little bit more about it.
Mhm.
What are 3 key things you've learned and used along your journey?
That's an excellent question. 3 key things. I would say it's given me a lot of compassion and understanding for other people. I'd say another thing that it's done is it allowed me to finally just be me, and not fit into everybody else's expectations, but just say, thank you for sharing. I'll take that under advisement and then do what I need to do. I'd say the third thing would be it's really given me an avenue to really impact other people's lives. Because if I can walk through this and be okay and accept myself for who I am, where I am, then how would it feel for other moms that are doing the best that they can to be able to finally accept themselves for where they are and to be able to look behind them and say, you know what, everything that I did getting here wasn't all mistakes. I wasn't a loser. I wasn't worthless. I wasn't useless. Every step of that way brought me to where I am here. And so therefore, I can be me and I can shine out in this world and help other people. So I think those are probably the big 3 that I have gotten through this whole thing, this whole process.
Yeah, and I can see that how you focused on you first, and then you can help the others, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's great. And so for you, it was mostly yourself, the family, and then you were like, okay, how do we make this work? And then you traveled. I don't mean traveling physically, but
Right.
externally to help other people. Yeah, they're great. They're great 3 things that you've shared
Thank
along your
you.
journey there. Yeah. Shaye, do you have anything else you would like to add?
I really want people to understand that ADHD is just a characteristic. It's just something that we do have a part of or is just a part of us, but it's not our identity. And I think we get sometimes too locked into be the identity of the diagnosis instead of just allowing it to be a part of us and be who we really are. Because who we really are comes from within. It's not what everybody else tells us. And if I matched myself to that identity, then a lot of the comparisons would tear me down and a lot of comparisons would take away. But being who I am has actually changed the trajectory of my life to a point where I enjoy it. I'm 53 years old. I wear cartoon socks. Once in a while, I go longboarding. Once in a while, I play with the grandkids. Once in a while, I do things that most 53-year-olds don't do. But you know what? At the same time, that's me and it's okay. And that's what I want other people to understand is the ADHD can be a gift. Allow it to be a gift, not your identity.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I'm big on being authentic and being yourself. So that's exactly what you're sharing right there. Just show up as yourself and try not to worry about what everybody else thinks about you.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
whether you have ADHD or not, it's for everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's cool. So you wear cartoon socks and go longboarding as well.
I do.
Shaye, I appreciate you coming on and sharing everything you know about ADHD and helping other women as well. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it, John.
You're welcome.